This is GovExec Daily, where we bring you the federal stories that really matter. It's March 21st, 2022. I'm Ross John Fortune. For decades, the Internal Revenue Service has been dealing with workforce issues. With shrinking budgets, the tax agency has had to increase its responsibilities, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic. IRS Commissioner Charles Rettig testified about his agency's needs during a hearing last year on Capitol Hill.
Like all federal agencies, the IRS is best suited to provide the services Americans deserve and appropriately enforce the tax laws in support of compliant taxpayers when it receives the resources it needs to do so. At a time when the IRS has faced consequential resource challenges, it has also been called upon to take on new, significant responsibilities.
Research from Syracuse University's Transactional Records Access Clearinghouse recently found a large increase in federal income tax audits targeting the poorest wage earners. This shift allowed the IRS to keep overall audit numbers from further declines during fiscal 2021. But that shift also resulted in low-income wage earners with less than $25,000 being audited at a rate 5 times higher than everyone else. Workforce issues are not new to the IRS, and the audit numbers speak to a resource allocation problem. But the decisions also reinforce mistrust in the agency that continues to have one of the lowest public opinion ratings among federal agencies. Dr. Susan B. Long is the co-founder and co-director of TRAC and the author of the report headlined IRS Audits Poorest Families at 5 times the rate for everyone else. After a short break, she'll join our show to discuss her research and the IRS.
GMarkU, a collaborative community-based platform for knowledge sharing and skills development. Bringing you together at cutting-edge, highly interactive events, including our premier conference, GAIN. Grow, accelerate, innovate, and network. Join the marketplace of knowledge. Learn, connect, insights at gmarku.com.
Tax season can be stressful for Americans. As the filing deadline approaches, a new report from the Transactional Records Access Clearinghouse at Syracuse University shows that Internal Revenue Service audit numbers were skewed toward lower income earners during the fiscal year 2021, further highlighting staffing issues at the agency. Susan B. Long is the co-founder and co-director of TRAC and the author of the report headlined IRS Audits Poorest Families at 5 times the rate for everyone else. She joins me now to discuss her research and the IRS. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So let's first talk about methodology. How did you conduct your research, and top line, what did you find?
Okay. Basically, we are a research data center, and I am a professor of manager of statistics, and so numbers are my specialty. And we have been doing this kind of monitoring of IRS audits for decades of time, and it's based on internal reports that we get from the IRS that they produce for their managers to monitor their activity internally.
So what did the sort of top line numbers find on this particular report?
Well, they were really, really shocking, I must say, even for someone that's been studying this for many, many years, in that the IRS targeted the lowest wage earners at 5 times the rate of everybody else in conducting their audits last year.
So part of your report talks about correspondence audits and how that is part of this. What are they, and what is their place within this dichotomy, I guess? Or
This is really central to what happened. A correspondence audit is basically a letter through the mail that a computer at IRS generates and sends out to a taxpayer, asking presumably for documentation on a particular line item of return. It is designed to do things that theoretically are supposed to be simple, so the taxpayer, could attach and send back, in theory, a receipt or something like that that justifies that. There are two kinds of problems here in that they have largely replaced regular audits. So there was this huge jump in reliance in correspondence audits last year. They now make up 85% of all audits. And by their design, they are only suitable really to ask about simple things. And that has a lot to do, therefore, with what taxpayers get audited or don't get audited. If you are a high income taxpayer, got a lot of complicated investments, you're a business, those can't be audited with a simple letter through the mail in that sense. And so reliance on correspondence audits means basically who gets audited. Now, there were some special wrinkles in the targeting of correspondence audits last year. Huge jump in the number of correspondence audits, and over half were on a particular line item claiming an earned income tax credit, which was really an anti-poverty device, and therefore the only folks that would be involved are the poorest wage earners among us. And another wrinkle is, it turns out that it's not at all a simple item to document. It's complicated to document. So you're sending off these letters to people asking very complicated things. Letters are written by computers after all, and if you've ever gotten one from the IRS, they're not necessarily understandable by us ordinary Americans. And last year, there was almost impossible to get through on the phone lines to talk to anybody to say, hey, what's going on here? What do I need to do? So essentially, basically, fundamentally unfair.
Public does not have particular confidence in the IRS. This has been well documented over the years, particularly with regards to the staffing issues. What do your findings mean for that low confidence? How has it changed the way that you look at the IRS?
Well, now this is not new. We did a report 20 years ago, exactly the same situation. Targeting on an earned income credit and a lack of audit staff capable of auditing the higher income folks, the complicated returns. There were over 600,000 millionaire returns that were filed that weren't even examined. And it really isn't the fault of the IRS. It's the fault of Congress for having cut back on its budget. And that's meant that it's had to cut back on its revenue agents by 41%. Well, they're expensive people because they're knowledgeable and experienced. And obviously, auditing a complicated return takes more time. And so IRS is between a rock and a hard place.
Why do you think the IRS tips the audits this way? Is this a workforce research source issue? Is this are they targeting specifically lower income earners out of spite, out of power dynamics?
Well, first of all, they have very few choices. They simply don't have the staff to do the kind of in-depth audits of taxpayers where most of the tax underreporting goes on in the first place. They simply just, there's nobody there. They don't have the staffing to man the phones. There's just fundamental problems across the system. Why did they choose to target? Over half of all the correspondence audits. Now that was a choice. And why they made that choice, I don't think there's evil intent there. They're trying to be as efficient as possible, and it was the simplest thing to do. And was that fair? That probably didn't enter into it, but the taxpayer advocate, even before these numbers were out, had already said this was not only inappropriate from a fairness perspective, but in the long run, it wasn't efficient from a monetary, the taxes and the costs of collection, actually. And I defer to the taxpayer advocate on the score of, if you consider in a long run sense, even if you're doing correspondence audits, why target this particular group? And she questioned that as a decision and made recommendations of one of the 10 items on her list of the most severe problems for taxpayers. Most of the others dealt with staffing issues.
Well, let's sort of end up on that, the sort of business standpoint. Again, we sort of talked about the limited resources they have. Does it make sense for the IRS to use its workforce or to shift its workforce on these audits, on these lower income audits? Do they not want to get into fights with sort of people that have the means to fight audits? Is it more that, sort of to go back to a bit what you've said before, that these are sort of low impact on the staff? Like, why? From a business standpoint, what's the best way to sort of use resources for the IRS?
Well, sometimes you really don't have any choices, right? Maybe it would make more sense as a homeowner for you to do something in the long run, and you just don't have any resources to do that. So that clearly is the overwhelming issue here. Secondly, the problem is if you audit a taxpayer that has high-priced attorneys and CPAs to defend them, it's going to take more time. And if you have too much of a short-term view of the need to produce results in short term, it's only in the long term that's been an effective policy. So to the extent you are looking very short term, you can see all the forces that are gathered to make the system very unfair.
Yeah, it seems like as with many things, the layers of this are not simple, and the outcome is such that inequality sort of seems to continue reigning as depressing as that is.
Yep. And the initial thing is to adopt the taxpayer advocate's recommendations, both on staffing, training, and not targeting complicated items. If you're going to do correspondence audits, you should be doing ones for which correspondence audits are better suited. And they shouldn't, however, be to the exclusion of more thorough audits conducted by real live people that are equipped to look at complicated tax returns, where all the evidence is that the tax underreporting is greatest. And a lot of money is at stake here.
Yeah, it seems like that would be at the front of a lot of people's mind, sort of across the political and socioeconomic spectrum when it comes to revenue in the IRS. But we will keep an eye on TRAC for sure. And thanks so much for being on the show with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to GovExec Daily. Our show was produced by Adam Butler and hosted by me, Ross John Fortuné. We want to thank Syracuse University's Dr. Susan B. Long for joining the program. Our music is the song Signals by Catfish Dancing. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or anywhere else you get your podcasts. You can email us any feedback at podcast@govexec.com or hit us up on Twitter @govexec. We'd love to hear from you. We'll talk to you later.